This episode is presented by the Visit Cedar City Brian Head Tourism Bureau. Discover the art of adventure at Utah's gateway to the parks. Cedar City is within a few hours' drive from 6 different national parks and monuments, and only 30 minutes from fresh snow at Brian Head Resort. Check out visitcedarcity.com to plan your next trip. This episode is sponsored by the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center, dedicated to supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs. It provides resources and services aimed at fostering business creation, growth, and retention. The center features the Makerspace, where entrepreneurs and small businesses can have access to 3D printers, video production, and photography equipment, t-shirt printing, and more. Whether you're starting a new venture or looking to expand an existing one, the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center offers the tools and guidance to help you succeed. To learn more and get involved, visit innovationcenter.cc. And welcome to Explore Local podcast presented by Visit Cedar City Brian Head and Cedar City Iron County Economic Development. This is produced by Dallas Smith Media, and I'm the host, David Johnson. I'm the Economic Development Director. And today, I'm excited to talk to Dave Staheli, who is the founder of Staheli West. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and let's see where this goes.
All right. I think we're in for a fun adventure. So. Yeah. I've watched some of the video productions Staheli West has done to kind of tell your story, and I'm really excited to tell that story today and dive in maybe a little bit deeper. So why don't we start off? Why don't you just tell us, 30,000, who is Staheli West? What do you guys do? And then maybe we can get into some of the fun stories about your company and about you.
Sure. Yep, you bet. So Staheli West, we are an agricultural equipment manufacturer. And all the other things that go with manufacturing, the marketing, the design work, the development work, the testing, all of the things that go into bringing something to the market, the customer support, the dealership network, all of those things are just different components, parts support, everything that you have to do to build things, get them out there, and have them stay working so that the benefits can be realized by the end user. Staheli West, everybody always asks me, so you're one partner in the company, and who is Mr. West? Well,
I didn't even think about that. I was thinking like where we live out west or something.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is too.
Okay.
But everybody thinks there's another silent, guy behind the curtain pulling the levers. And sometimes I wish there was, to be honest with you. But we actually are the manufacturer of a process and a product that I developed on the farm years ago. We'll talk a lot more about that. Yeah. And at that time, never really looked at it as hey, let's go to the whole world kind of a thing until I discovered how well it worked. And we'll talk more about that story as we go. But it is very revolutionary what we're doing. It's a steam rehydration process for harvesting dry baled hay products, alfalfa, grasses, anything that people put in a bale. We preserve the quality of that material and make it so that they can work throughout basically almost any time of the day instead of relying on natural dew from Mother Nature. And I have to be careful about that because somebody once did a little ad for us, and it said, you don't have to worry about Mother Nature anymore. I said, nope, we're not doing that one. So
Mother Nature still has some importance.
Mother
involved.
Nature and our Father above, you have to just keep a lot of good respect there always.
Yeah. And so, for our listeners, high level, essentially this is a machine developed, and we'll kind of get into the development and how that came to be a little bit later, but a machine that helps basically put water into hay so that it's a better quality hay for the animals? Is it easier in baling? Does it also assist in the baling process, right?
Yeah.
So if you can visualize that, if you're a farm boy, 10 times more than I do. If you're not a farm boy, there's your layman's description of what this machine does. Is it puts those hay bays into cubes, and it basically injects moisture, puts moisture in them. Injects probably not the right word. You can correct me more later.
Yeah, that's one we use. Yeah,
yeah, and so that that hay is better quality for those animals and easier use, I guess, in a lot of ways. From some of those things.
And just a slight correction or explanation. You mentioned putting water into hay. It is technically water, but it's in the form of steam.
Right.
So, and that's a really key part of why it works so well. Sometimes people go, I don't want to be using that. And we're putting water in my hay. And we say, well, it's actually in the form of steam. So it's a very low volume, but has a very effective medium for rehydrating hay to the point that it does bale up very nicely. In fact, it's superior to natural dew in most cases. And just is very revolutionary.
Yeah,
Super
that's
good.
Awesome.
So,
When I was in high school, in Arizona, there was a woman that lived not too far from us, had a little, her own little horse ranch. It was like a 2-3 horse ranch, on a few acres. And I had the distinct pleasure of cleaning the stalls and feeding the horses occasionally. And I think I've pinpointed that that's when my alfalfa hay allergy began. And it's never gone away. And thinking back, I'm like, man, could have used a little moisture in that alfalfa hay, because the dust, I just remember, was so relentless. And, if anybody's cleaned stalls or fed animals in general, you get dusty, you get dirty. And I'm not claiming to be any kind of major farm boy. I think I was just a city slicker posing a little bit.
It sounds like you were there.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were there. Interestingly, you said you have the alfalfa allergy that you discovered at that time. I grew up with a terrible alfalfa allergy. Yeah.
And you're just like, let me dive into that.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in this business, you know? My brothers and I would go haul hay the old-fashioned way back when I was old enough to see over the dashboard of a 2.5-ton truck.
There you go. And you probably started driving about then too, right?
Yeah. I was pretty young. And but then I'd roll the bales while they went and unloaded the truck by hand, because I was the little kid brother. Yeah. And boy, I got some of those years that we were doing that, I'd get so sick from my allergies to alfalfa, and I wondered, why in the world are we doing this? But that was the stuff we did, growing up. Yeah. So it's kind of ironic that I became a hay farmer, and went through a few other things first, but found that that's where my love was, as far as an occupation, managing this hay operation out here. In the Cedar Valley, and then to get into this, and we go all over the world now with, in hay fields wherever. Yeah. And so my allergies get me just a little, but they pretty well have cured themselves, unless I get into a really, crawl inside a hay baler where it's really dusty or something, and you're trying to fix something. Yeah. I still get the itchies and the swollen eyes and the runny nose and everything.
My poor kids inherited it from me. And anyways, well, so I'm glad we kind of dove into the childhood thing, because that's actually where I wanted to start with you. So, and did you just mention, did you grow up on a farm? Did your parents have a farm? Was that something growing up, or tell me about your childhood a little bit, and how maybe you were first introduced to farming and kind of got started there.
Sure. My dad, actually, when I was like 6 years old, he bought just a little 5-acre farm.
Just to work the kids?
Just to have some room, I think, more than anything. Okay. My dad was super good at giving us things to do. Oh, yeah. For the work ethic, and everything of his children.
That's how you've got a quality parenting skills, right?
Yeah, and it's a lot easier if you have something that needs to actually be done, and you're not just inventing something to do for your children. But anyway, so we had this little 5-acre piece with alfalfa on it. We built a house on the one end of it. I remember when we moved down there out of our neighborhood, I was real sad to leave the old house that they had built earlier, that I grew up in till I was about 5. we lived in a little interim rental house while our house was being built. And when we moved down there, it kind of seemed like we were far away from things. We really weren't too far away, but there was lots of room. So we built corrals. We had our horses. We had cows. We had we'd get little lambs and stuff and raise them, when we were little kids. But
was that here locally?
That was in Enterprise.
Enterprise, okay.
Yeah, just over the hill here. And so, but we would get someone to come and cut our hay and bale it for us, and then we'd haul it by hand. So when I was 8 years old, I suppose, is when I started driving the pickup for my dad and my brothers and my older sisters to haul the hay. Luckily, I didn't ever run over anyone.
That's good.
But it was an old 52 Chevy pickup and 3/4 ton, so it could haul a lot of hay and not squat down too much.
Yeah.
But I had to get off the seat, push the clutch. It had a foot pedal starter on it, so you had to push the foot pedal to start it up.
Really?
Yeah, but I had to get off the seat, put it in compound, my dad called it, first gear, and then let out the clutch.
I haven't heard that term in a long time. I don't know why I know that term.
The old-timers always called it compound.
Yeah. That's funny.
So anyway, then I'd let the clutch out, and then I'd get back up on the seat, and it had a little throttle knob you could pull out on the dashboard, so you give a little gas from the dashboard instead of
like a little choke, right?
Yeah. It had two buttons, the throttle and the choke that you could pull out. So anyway, that is how I grew up. That old pickup was really interesting. It ran great until you used it for about 15 minutes, and then it would always overheat. Then it didn't want to run good. But
that's how
what
old
you grew
pickups
up,
go.
And it was fun. It was great when things weren't just perfect in your life. You learned a lot more.
Yeah.
Now we get in, we push the button on our car, it goes,
It's too easy.
It's way too easy. And, I am so thankful for those imperfections of life that taught me how to figure out things and maybe look for improvements and just deal with things in general.
Yeah.
I've felt, especially lately, like the not perfect life was the perfect life for me, because that's how I even grew to want to play with ideas or do things of any kind, was through the less than perfect circumstances that you found yourself in sometimes. Now, my family life was perfect. But things weren't always just perfect in their little order around you.
It's funny that you say that, because I have a very similar perspective on life. In fact, in one of our previous podcasts, we were talking to a couple actors from Shakespeare who are in a play called Silent Sky, and it's about these female astronomers and mathematicians, and they weren't allowed to use telescopes. The females weren't. And because of that, they studied the sky in different ways and made discoveries that the men with the telescopes didn't make. And we talked about on there. So it's interesting that you're kind of saying that, because it just is very reminiscent of that conversation of how sometimes when we don't have some of the tools, we get creative, we get inventive, and we start thinking, well, how can I solve this problem? And it opens our eyes in different ways. And it almost makes me feel old-timerish to say this, but even yesterday I was driving home and I saw a kid on an electric scooter, and I thought, kids don't even have to push their scooters anymore.
I know. They don't have to go like with their foot or pedal anymore. I know. Yeah, it's so true. And then they have to go work out.
Yeah. Well, not to digress too much. Yeah, but it's awesome to kind of hear how those imperfections cause us to start to think differently and look at maybe what are different ways that we can approach things, right? So tell me a little bit more before I definitely, we're going to dive right into the Staheli West story, but I want to hear a little bit more. So was that what your family did full time, or did your dad do something else and had the farm on the side to keep you working hard? Or
so my dad was actually the local postmaster there for many, many years. As early as I can remember, that's what he was doing. And he graduated from that after I'd left home, so through all of my growing up years, that's what he did. And that was how he made the living for our family. Generally, we had a big family. We had 8 living children all through that time.
And you were one of the younger ones?
I'm one of the sort of lower middle.
Lower middle.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was in the lower half.
Okay.
I was number 6.
Number 6. Okay.
Yeah. So we had lots of fun around there. But my dad also always had horses. He grew up with that. His dad actually was a range cowboy, my grandpa Staheli.
Okay.
That was what most of his life he spent doing, was actually out on the range with cows. And then they had a little farm and stuff.
So working the land's in your blood.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, really interesting. I'm going to digress back to a little bit of that because this became an interesting component of what we're doing now. They had alfalfa that they grew on a little, I can't remember how many acres my grandpa had, but it may have been 10 or 20 or something. It was quite a bit for doing things by hand with a team and a wagon and, the tools that horses pulled, and how you hauled hay was with pitchfork. And so they would have the flat rack, and then they'd load it on the flat rack in the field, haul it into the stack yard, and then it was really an art to know how to build a haystack. Wish I had that picture here with me to show you my grandpa up on a haystack.
Yeah, that would be cool.
But it had to be done. The hay was loose hay; it wasn't baled. So when it rained or snowed, what do you think was going to happen? It was going to just go right through it, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, it wouldn't, because if you knew how to build a haystack, you would build it and you would make it into a shed all the way up to the very top. And these were big haystacks.
Yeah. I'm having pictures actually from, this is my only reference, from movies.
Right.
Where, they have back in the pioneer days, and they show those haystacks and them building those, and they kind of almost a rounded top the way it's done, right?
So it was shed water. And my dad, I couldn't believe it, but my dad said, the water never got down into those stacks.
Really?
Just if you knew how to do it. So my grandpa was really good at that, but he was out on the range a lot. So as the boys got a little older, my dad, who was Stan Staheli, and my Uncle Ken would go, they thought one day, hey, we're going to do a big favor for our dad. And we're going to go haul this hay while he's out on the range. And when he gets back, he'll be happy because it's all done. So they did. They went out, they loaded hay, they hauled it all into the thing. They kind of watched how their dad had built the stacks and stuff. But the thing that they didn't do is they did it during the daytime when there was no natural dew on the hay, and they knocked all the leaves off from it, even with a pitchfork, And boy, they got in trouble because that was the feed for the winter.
Yeah.
This was just one.
Isn't that
crop.
the worst when you're trying to help with something and you make the situation worse? Yeah.
But that was the most interesting story, because when we got going on what we do with putting steam into hay, it was just to soften it, to make it so you don't have to wait for natural dew. And my dad told me that story. He said, "Yeah, I know about that. Even in the days of the pitchfork, it was a problem." But anyway, childhoodish. The fun thing about my childhood, and some really good things happened. One of the most key events that happened that changed who I would have been, and I know it did, is our TV broke. When I was probably 9 years old. I loved watching Gilligan's Island. Like, that was my favorite show. And it was on at 4:00 after school, So we'd go down and watch that. One day, the old Zenith, we had to put tinfoil on the rabbit ears and everything to get it to come in. And then we had to have one of us stand in the right place so the rest of the family could watch. Well, it went bad. We brought it over to Cedar. I'll never forget, we were parked behind Bullock Drug there. And there was a little TV shop there in one of the other buildings. My dad took it in, and when we came back to pick it up, the guy said, well, it's really not worth fixing. So my dad came out to the car. We'd been waiting in the car. He came out and he said, well, guys, the TV's haywire. That's what he called it. He said, it's just gone haywire, and we're just not going to worry about a TV. So we didn't have a TV after that for years. Yeah. And it literally changed the trajectory of my life, because I just went and played.
You found something more productive.
I played in the dirt.
Or unproductive as well, maybe. Yeah. Mischievous.
Well, it was awesome. No, it was so good, because I actually gained a great love to play with trucks in the dirt.
There you go.
And little tractors and things like that, And in fact, when I was about 11, I guess I would have been, we did some work for a farmer out in the valley. My dad was always really good at finding work for us to do. And at this point, my brothers and I took this job of moving some old wheel lines from one farm to another that the guy had bought from another farmer. It was Jay Hunt, and that we were working for. I earned some money. I earned enough to buy me a 22 rifle, a Model 94 22, and a toy tractor. How's that?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I went down to Crossroads Equipment, bought me a toy tractor with some little implements. I was the weirdest little kid in the world because I got caught once by my friends. I was in my backyard, and I was like 12 years old, 13. And all these guys come running into my backyard, and I'm out there still playing with trucks in the dirt. I played with trucks and tractors until I started working for farmers. It was really weird. I was a weird little kid.
But preserving some of the innocence, I like it when my kids are delayed, not delayed developmentally. We don't want to see that, but delayed in, turning into like teenagers and not caring about the little kid stuff. I love that, preserving that a little bit.
But the thing, and I'll just finish this one thing about that is, my mom and dad couldn't afford to buy a big Christmas presents and all those kind of things. It was always very, modest. Conservative and modest.
Yeah.
But I found myself building little implements for my little tractors.
Really?
I did. I built a furrower because I wanted a potato field. I built, little things to go with it. I had a Tonka truck that was a cement mixer, and I really didn't need a cement mixer. I needed a flatbed truck. So I took it off. I took that off. I actually extended the wheelbase out, took a piece of plywood and made a flatbed, put some stakes in it, some holes so I could put sideboards on. And, that was where I really started to just make things that I didn't have. Yeah. And that's where it began. That's why I say the TV thing changed my life. I would have never, I really shudder to think where I would have been if the TV would have stayed working. Yeah. I really seriously do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, an innovator in the making.
It was fun.
And it's interesting, back then, I'm sure your parents, and I'm putting some words in their mouths, I guess, probably looking at you thinking, oh, that's cool. He's being creative, but sometimes we don't see those moments as potentially pivotal moments in the trajectory of someone's life, or maybe a skill or talent that they have, and to see those things develop. So, well, it's interesting to me too that you mentioned you had the allergies, and yet here's the business that you chose to be in. And so fast forward a little bit, and you also mentioned working for Jay Hunt. Now, is this the same Hunt family that wasn't it a Hunt family you were working for when you came up with the idea?
No, it was Hunter.
Hunter. Oh, okay. I thought there was a
here
Hunt
in this valley.
Okay. So fast forward, what brought you over here, and what got you started with farming here and made you choose like a career in farming? And then, then let's start really diving into Staheli West.
Yeah. Yep. So I will tie the string from enterprise to here.
Sure, yeah.
So as I was growing up, I worked for several different farmers over there. One of them was Brad Barlow, really early on, moving hand lines. We did work for Jay Hunt. We hauled a lot of hay for him. And then later I worked at age 13, right?
Man, you've already accomplished half of your life.
Half of my life was my career. Then I went to work for a really wonderful man in enterprise named Bob Holt. Okay. Super good guy. Just so many opportunities came from my time there working with him. And we didn't really work with him so much because there was a crew. He has a huge operation over there now, much bigger than it was at that time. But, and his kids have kind of taken it. But I grew up, my manhood, I'm going to say this seriously, started when I was very young, before I went to work for him. When I first went to work for him, I was 13. He didn't know I was 13. I was a little guy though. But as we did in those days, we would drive the potato trucks, the grain trucks, everything, the big trucks all around. One year, I was the one that was assigned to haul all of the grain from the field that was being harvested and take it into the shed and unload it and stack it and all that.
Yeah.
So he asked me toward the end of that summer when we were almost done, he said, when do you turn 15? Because I told him I was 14 because I was going to turn 14 in just a month or two. You know?
You were on the cusp, right?
I was technically in my 14th year, right?
Yeah, technically.
I said, well, actually, I turned 14 in September. And he said, oh my gosh, you mean I've had you driving these trucks down the highway in this valley at 13 years old? I said, I know, I'm probably no. He said, well, that's okay. But anyway, so the good thing about it was, though, is you were expected to step up and be a man when you were young. And when you talk about not having to mature too fast, in a way we didn't, but in another way we did.
Well, and it's about growing in the right areas, right? Like I think I guess we digress into parental thoughts, but and you want to see young kids and just people in general develop where in their maturity and in their responsibility and those types of things, and yet you want to preserve a level of innocence in their character, so to speak, if that makes sense. And so
absolutely.
Anyways,
absolutely. But the way that led me here was I went through high school, worked for him, worked tons of hours. Our summers were 6:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night every day,
Wow.
6 days a week.
I bet you were ripped. You were just probably buff.
Oh yeah, just like I am now. Just kidding. I don't know. We might have worked hard enough that nothing could accumulate, muscular. But we had to work. We did. We worked super hard, long hours. It was the best thing in the world, and everybody did it. Yeah. All the guys growing up did that. A lot of the girls worked for their parents, so that were farmers too. But the great thing about it is we learned expectations that we needed to meet, or we would be kicking clods down the road. Yeah.
Well,
at the end of the day.
You saw the value of deadlines,
right?
Controlled almost by Mother Nature, right? A lot of the times,
and just expectations of your employer that you be to work, that you be ready, you be on the corner waiting to get picked up in the morning, and you not make them have to drive down to the house to get you, or you're in big trouble. Right. All of those things were just super good, and that working for Bob Holt over those years was also one of my life-changing experience, I would say, of learning responsibility. But as I grew up, got out of high school, served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from 1979 through 81.
Where'd you go?
To Minnesota.
Yeah, okay.
Minneapolis. Yeah, that area. And it was a great experience. Got back, and first thing I did was the day after I got home, they were harvesting potatoes. It was this time of year. I got home on the 21st of September, I believe, and I was in the field the next day driving a potato digger.
Classic, and, nothing had changed, right?
No, it was awesome. The machinery was a lot nicer than the 2 years before when I was there, and so I really loved it, but I knew in the end that I wasn't going to be able to just stay doing the same thing all the time. But I didn't really have a particular direction I wanted to go at that point. But I did, I figured I'd come to school over here at Southern Utah State College at the time, which I did. And I was going to go into the teaching profession, actually.
Oh, really?
I really was interested in doing that. But as I met my wife and we got married and started our family, there was something else that I needed my hands on mechanical things. So I actually switched over to the automotive program for a little while.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't get very far through college, so I'm a great example of getting your education, right? A little different way for me, but we ended up moving back out to Enterprise, working for the Holt Farms again for a little while. And then Brent Hunter here in the Cedar Valley approached me. I had known him through some church leadership responsibilities that we had a year before that. And he said, hey, your brother-in-law tells me that I really should hire you to manage my farm. And
Good brother-in-law.
Yeah, he was. Flip Gardner. He was a sheep man, and he worked with him. And so I came over, and we took a ride down to the farm. He took me in the back row to that farm, and it was literally, I'm not kidding, the Garden of Eden. It wasn't like perfect clean everywhere, but it was like, I was really touched by it, that this is the right thing to do. And so I came over and went to work for him, managed the farm while he did the livestock side of the operation with sheep. And that's where I raised my family, is right there on the little farm. We lived in an old farmhouse and later bought a different house on the farm that he had built. That's where we live now too.
Well, and so
it's awesome.
This is a great segue. So this is then you're working for, did you say Brent
Hunter?
Working for Brent Hunter, and there was a really dry year, right? And I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Why don't you tell a little bit? Let's now tell a little bit about how this came to be with Staheli West and where these ideas came from. And I'm really looking forward not only hearing about, the hurdle that you had to get over, but how tacos played a role in it.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Well, again, I was kind of an experimenter at the farm all the time too, and this would have never happened had Brent Hunter not been the boss. It was just the perfect combination of things and people. I started there in 1984, and it was in the 90s actually when I had become so frustrated with trying to manage the moisture in hay while we baled. It was my responsibility then to make sure that things were done right. Either had too much dew, not enough dew, or no dew at all. This year was that year was 1994, when we just had a particularly dry year. It was typical, but it was just really frustrating, maybe a little worse than average. And it was in June, and we just got no natural dew for several weeks in a row. And so we had quite a bit of hay on the ground. It wasn't a real big operation. It was about a 500-600 acre operation at the time, but we had 200 or 300 acres down that we just couldn't get conditions that were good for baling. And I had thought about this a little. I knew about people who had used a spray rig, like a field sprayer that they would spray weeds with, or different things that would go out and put water on the windrows just with a boom and let it kind of percolate for a little bit and then try to bale, but it never worked well. And I just was like, gosh, there's got to be something. There's got to be something here that we could do. And I thought of a few things, and I was just one night I was home, and I really, really believe that God knows way more than I do. I know He does, and I think He can give us a little help sometimes. So I was just praying for some help to figure out what to do to get our operation in a way that we could actually be a little more consistent. And immediately a thought came to my mind, which I know was straight inspiration, but it was based on an experience that I had had, or experiences I had had in the past, which I think is kind of interesting, the way God uses those experiences to bring about other things. And it was seeing the girls at taco time, not just because they were girls. Now, don't take me wrong on that. Back when I was single. But I'd seen them put a tortilla in the little steamer oven. And older people will remember those. I think there's a few places that still use them, but they'd put them in, shut the door, push a little button, it would throw some water on some hot coils in there and create an instant shot of steam, and they pulled it right out, and it was soft and all warmed up nice to make a taco or a burrito or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was the thought that just hit me right then, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's interesting, because I knew what the tortillas felt like. They weren't wet.
Right.
But they were warm, but they weren't hot.
Right.
But they were soft.
Right.
That's what I needed. Right. So the next day, it was while I had hay on the ground, the next day I took a cardboard box out of the shop down there at the farm and went out in the field and just carefully gathered an armload of hay and put it in the box. So I went and knocked all the leaves off, and I took it into my wife's kitchen and put it on the counter there by the stove. And she's like, "What are you doing?" I to do a little experiment here. She's like, why are you on my kitchen? Get out
of here.
So I got a little pressure cooker that we had and put it on the stove with some water in it. And I had gotten a little piece of automotive vacuum hose, which is just a little small rubber hose, and put on the top where the pressure weight fit on the pressure cooker normally. Got the steam going, and then I just put that hose down in that box of hay in about 6 places, I would say, and let it just run for 2 or 3 seconds in each spot. And it was a good little stream of steam. I reached my hand in there, and honestly, I was like, wow, that was truly an answer to my prayers.
Really?
It was just unbelievable what it did and how quickly it did it. It was just, it blew my mind.
It just softened it up.
Softened it up.
Liven it up a bit or something?
It wasn't wet, but it was moist.
Yeah.
But it was soft and just pliable, not brittle anymore.
So for those that aren't familiar with farming or why dew is important, just give a very brief, why is the moisture important? Because earlier you were talking about in the old days when they build the bales of hay, they were trying to keep the water out, right?
Right.
So why then do you want a little moisture? What does it do for the product and for those that are buying the product? Why do they want that nice balance in there?
Right. Great. So I told the story about the pitchfork, right? So in those days, it was important that they get that while it had natural dew on it, so that when they put it on the hay rack, and then they would actually tromp the hay down to kind of compact it so they could put more on. If it was dry, it would just shatter it and knock all the leaves off. Well, fast forward to the modern hay balers. A hay baler picks hay up off from the ground from a windrow, feeds it into a chamber where a plunger comes and presses that hay into a bale in the bale chamber. But the plunger's running, at, I don't know, back in those days, 60, 70 strokes a minute. Nowadays, they're more on the small balers, less on the big ones. But each time that plunger would come back, and even during the handling, bringing the hay off the ground, if it was dry and didn't have some natural dew on it, would knock a lot of the leaves off, which is the most valuable part of the feed.
Gotcha.
And then when the plunger would hit, it would just macerate it. It's really hard on it.
The plunger is essentially compacting it, right?
It's like a piston, basically, that hammers hay into a bale. So everyone and I guess goes back to the pitchfork days, but as balers came in, they also had to get it with natural dew so it was soft. The problem is consistency and the weather and everything. You just didn't know if you were going to get too much. If you got too much, you would spoil the hay and maybe burn the stack down with the heating that happens with that. Or if it was not enough, you'd have shattered hay that was dry and dusty.
Hay stacks, if there's a little moisture, it creates a natural warmth with that moisture because of the piled on. It's almost like how compost works, right?
Right, it is.
Although it's not composting, so forgive my.
But if you leave the clippings on your grass in the lawnmower bag, you can start a fire.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Because it will heat up enough with the activity of the bacteria and everything in there.
So that level of moisture helps sustain it. Essentially, is what it's doing.
It needs You
can correct me because I'm not the farm boy.
It's so critical that it be at the right level. Like a bale of hay, if you have moisture below 15% or so or less in the stack, you're okay.
Okay.
If you have it up at 20% or more, you're in trouble. You're either going to spoil it or you're going to burn the stack down.
Right. So this new process that you came up with, how did you get from using your wife's pressure cooker to creating something that had that right percentage of moisture that you're looking for?
Okay. Yeah. Great question. I recognized right off that we needed steam. I knew nothing about boilers except that they had water go in and they had steam come out. So I went to the library. We didn't have an internet back then in 1994. At least I didn't know about it. It might have started by then, but nobody used it. I found some stuff on boilers and making steam in the encyclopedia, no less, Britannica.
Yeah. Classic. Right? I remember those stacks on the shelves.
Right.
Yeah.
And all it showed was these huge power plant boilers. And I'm going, oh man, this looks complicated. So anyway, but I will try to, keep this short so that we get through it. But I basically knew that I needed to make steam. First, I thought I maybe could use just a steam cleaner, a pressure washer, a hot water pressure washer. Everybody's and I got looking at that and thought, oh, that'd be pretty easy. It's making steam, but it really wasn't steam. It was just hot water. And I checked around with a couple of people here in town that had those here at Metalcraft when Metalcraft was in business. They had one in their shop that they used for cleaning steel and stuff like that. So I went up there, I remember, and talked with the guy, but found out it really was water. So I needed to make steam. So really what I did then was just went to the Yellow Pages there we go,
Yeah.
encyclopedias and yellow pages. And I looked up boiler distributors and found some in Salt Lake and inquired and found out that, they could get boilers from various manufacturers. And so just got that conversation going. And I learned a lot since then, obviously, about making steam and how it should work. And actually the direction as they understood what I was looking for was really good, because I did get the right kind of a boiler. It was just much too small the first time.
Gotcha.
But I ordered it, and money was an issue. I had a little business that I was doing kind of on the side, was a lawn fertilization business where we'd go out and spray people's lawns for fertilizer, bugs, weeds, whatever, here in town. And I decided that in order for me to take this anywhere, I needed some money. So I sold that business to someone else.
Oh, use that as your capital.
That was my capital. Gotcha. I think I got $60,000.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I started. And then my dad said, hey, if you need a little bit more, I'll loan you a little bit too, and we can get that going. So he facilitated a little bit of that too, but basically just started on a shoestring. Boiler came in, found out that as I built this machine, and I had built a little sidecar on the steamer part of it, I knew I needed to hook the hay baler up behind it. So I had this little deal going with the sidecar with spikes that would inject steam down into the windrow, and then the baler would pick it up just a couple of seconds later, 2 or 3 seconds later. I was really excited about it, to the point that I actually prepared and filed a patent on that. Oh, wow. But did it before I proved it out. Oh. So as I got going on that, the first time in the field, I was so excited. Had a few people around watching, to see how this was going to go. We tested it down the windrow without a baler. It worked great. The hay was soft. So I hooked up the hay baler, and when I went in the field that time, as the steam went on and then the baler picked it up and the bale was made, the bale was really horrible. It did not look good. So I was like, oh boy, got to go home and tell my wife that this isn't really a great thing that I just spent all that money on,
So part of it was probably the balance in the moisture, or
it was general? Where you put the moisture. Oh, okay. So what I discovered over the next week or two after that is that steam goes into alfalfa or whatever dry forage you're doing instantly, but it doesn't stay there. Oh, okay. Unless you get it compacted. So I eventually, as I tried different things, I had to abandon my brilliant idea of the sidecar, and I actually put it in the baler and just built hardware that would distribute it in the baler as it was picked up and then as it was compressed. And
so one process at the same time, essentially.
Yep, these were all happening together. So the steamer was hooked up to the baler and the tractor in front. And that little jalopy machine, you know what? We got it to work. Yeah. The boiler was much too small, I found. So I had to order another one. And, again, some of the expenses of getting that going. But that year we succeeded with enough, getting the right boiler, a second boiler within that season, and making it work in the field to where we could actually work it in a production setting and make really nice hay with a small baler. Yeah. A small 3-string baler. So that's kind of how that all came out. Then I had to file a new patent that reflected that way of doing it, and did that back in 1990. Actually, 1995 was when we got it in the field the first time, and ever since then, been moving forward. Developing and making.
You're manufacturing those, right? You have facilities. So how many of the latest model, what's your latest model called? Or maybe you got a couple.
Well, we do have a couple right now. The larger one is a 632, a dew point 632. The smaller one is a dew point 331.
I love the name balers. Dew point, you're creating that dew essentially and getting it right to the point that you need it. Yeah. How many of those machines a year do you guys sell, and are you selling internationally? Talk a little bit about that. So
we've over the years we've developed from just a few machines that we started with back in 1996. I sold the first machines that we had built to other people. We built 9 of them at the time, and put them around in different places in the western U.S., Idaho, Utah, Nevada, mostly.
And Staheli West.
Staheli West was our company. Yeah, that was our company. And so anyway, that's kind of how we got started. Those machines, I wasn't the greatest engineer in the world, and they kind of started to have trouble. So it was a really interesting year, a grueling year, but a year that really tested my mettle, I guess. And it was probably an experience I needed to have. But we went from there, and then actually some of the major manufacturers got interested in what we were doing. There was an article published about us in the Hay and Forage magazine, which is a nationwide magazine.
I was going to ask kind of how you started building your clientele, so this is good.
Right. Actually, we ended up licensing John Deere with this.
Really?
Right after that. They were the company that seemed to have the best track that they wanted to take it.
So they were licensing the right to use your
develop
patent
and
to
build, right?
Do their own dew point, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I worked with them a lot. I spent a lot of time with them, both here in the field and back in their plant in Ottumwa, Iowa.
And they just heard about you through this magazine. They saw this little article
what it was.
About you.
Yeah, basically what it was. So they and AGCO and New Holland, all three got interested in what we were doing, but we ended up licensing Deere at the time. And they worked with us or I worked with them for, I guess, probably, I'm trying to remember how many years. It was up from 1998 up through 2006. Oh, wow. So about 8 years.
Wow, okay.
Now, we were running all the time with our old machine that I had built. And I'd built, several of them, obviously. By the time I got done, I think there were 11 there would have been 11 total that we'd built up to that point. And so they built some versions of theirs that they wanted to do. We were just harvesting, with our old machine that we had built, and we'd figured out.
You're still farming
managing
yourself.
the farm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We loved it. We were doing big bales by then, so we'd done both small bales, big bales, but the 1-ton bales is what we were doing. They came out and watched us do that, and they were like, wow, this is something, and so that's when we licensed them, and they took it and did their own development work. Actually, they got I can't talk a lot about some things about it, but they got all finished with their version, and I can't even tell you much about the configuration, just with the proprietary things. But it worked pretty well, but they ended up pulling out.
Really? John Deere did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was just, there were some things about it that just weren't working out for them. So I took the license back from them, and that's in 2006. And that's when I went back to the drawing board. I learned how to do 3D CAD work and all that kind of stuff at that time, which I'd just done pencil drawing before that.
Yeah.
But designed these newer machines, which we built we started into business of actually selling machines in about 2009. After I'd built the first new model, which was a far superior machine to what we'd done before. Yeah. We computerized a lot of the control system and all that kind of stuff, and it was really cool. But we built that basic frame model up until just of that larger machine for the large square balers until just about, I guess last year was it last year or the year prior? I'm trying to remember. I guess it was the year prior that we built our final machines of that frame.
Gotcha.
And so, but we had developed a small machine by then too, on a whole different platform, the electronics and everything. We took to a whole different level, using a lot of the isobus world. It's a really interesting control system and things. So right now we build two types of steamers. We still build a large one, but it's a new one. Gotcha. It's not the old ones we built through those years. And then the small one, which is for small bales and like small square bales that you would get at a feed store or something like that. So anyway, we've developed those two sizes. They both run on a really interesting platform that is just amazing. The monitors that we use and stuff are, they're absolutely just awesome. And so in doing that though, now as we go forward, we've built we're pushing 1,000 machines now that we've built, that we've distributed throughout the world.
Wow. Collectively over the years, or
annually? Not annually. Okay. No, we're not big like that.
Gotcha.
But that's over the years. It's really increased lately, except this year's been a little down with the farm markets being off some. but we build the large one for large square balers. We build the small one for the small square balers. And we're actually just now building a mid-sized machine that will be used in the round bale markets back, like in the Midwest, all across the Midwest. Super excited about that too, because it opens up a huge market in those arenas. So
now, how do you warranty something like that? Here I am, just totally naive, thinking of Apple coming out with a new iPhone every year, and so that you just have to buy the new one. But I assume you're not taking an Apple approach. You're building these machines to last a long time. Yes. How does that relationship work with these farmers that are purchasing? And
great. Well, the first few years we sold directly to farmers.
Okay.
And then it was obvious that we were not going to be able to keep our arms around the service end of it and the sales end of it, all the things that come into play as you get bigger and bigger. And while we're, I would say, very much a niche company, still this is a niche compared to the thousands and thousands of tractors, John Deere builds or whatever. It is really a significant technology that is literally changing that forage world, especially where people bale dried hay. So the question you had was,
how do you basically the life of those machines and working with these farmers that are saying, maybe I should invest in that. What, how do you work with them? And obviously you were just saying maybe you're not working with them direct. So talk about that dynamic. If there's a farmer that listens to this and says, hey, I'm interested in that, or even if there's, I have a couple other questions.
Okay. I will address that. Just backing up a step, I get myself off on tangents.
No, you know what? We'll be tangential together, so it's perfectly fine. We've talked about parenting, and scooters,
it's everything. Right.
You're playing in the mud. So that's what podcasts are about.
That's right. Well, we actually had we were doing direct sales for the first few years.
Okay.
We could see that was getting beyond our ability to really keep our arms around it. So we started the dealership model.
Okay.
And currently we have well over 100 dealers through the United States and down in Australia, in South America.
Are they under your umbrella, or are they like contract dealers?
They're just dealers? So what we would be considered is what they call a short line. So they might be a John Deere dealer or an AGCO Massey Ferguson dealer or a New Holland dealer or whatever. But we've contracted with them to have them carry our equipment and to provide the service and the support,
selling the accessories, essentially.
Well, and even selling the machines and making sure that service is taken care of if there's a problem. So we have a very well organized training system for those guys. Every year that we bring them in for updated training. And also our customers we bring in. We keep a lot of direct customer support also going directly as Staheli West. So we have annual trainings for customers and for dealers so that everybody stays on top of the technology. So we've been doing that for a number of years. 2011, I think, was when we first did the dealership model. And it's been great. We've had to learn a few things through that because it's a whole different world. But it's been awesome. Our dealers are great. They love the technology, and they're good at taking care of the people out in the field. And we do annual training for all of their technicians, all that kind of stuff. So when you talk about, warranties and all those kind of things, we have our warranty system where we take care of them for a certain amount of time without, with just us taking care of what we sold. And then through the dealerships, all of those kind of things happen and the machines are kept up. We have a parts business that's actually a separate business that supplies all the parts worldwide.
Right.
And a very robust support team that has done just a phenomenal job with developing interactive service related resources that they can go in. We have an app that they can have on their phone or computer that they can find anything they need. And then we do direct support also if needed with the technicians out there.
Well, one thing you made me think of is kind of before we started this show, we talked a little bit about, starting a small business owner is sometimes hard especially if you're a small business that transitions, right?
Right.
You're growing.
Right.
And what's hard about it is a lot of people get into certain businesses, whether it's ag or a baker or a mechanic, because they're really good at the skill that they do.
Mm-hmm.
They really have a passion for this. But then when business starts growing, you start to have to manage things outside of your realm. And in some areas, you can hone in and do really well. In other areas, and you've kind of acknowledged this with the dealership, you have to step back and say, you know what, that's not my expertise or my passion.
Right.
So how can I create something or bring in those that have those skills to make this successful? And in business, a lot of times I find a lot of small business owners, or you see it in bigger businesses too sometimes, where they feel like they have to do and manage everything.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. I mean, even in my job, I always say when businesses come to me and they want to come to Cedar City, Iron County, and they say, hey, can you tell me about the utilities here or this property here? And I usually say, you know what? I don't know that I can tell you that off the top of my head, but let me get you connected with the right person that's going to help answer your questions to get you what you need, right? And there's sometimes we forget to acknowledge that in business to be successful, that successful business is often pulling in the right people.
Yeah.
Which actually makes me think of a question that I had as you were talking earlier. So what was so interesting to me is you said that you hadn't finished school, a college degree, but then later you're talking about you're doing all this engineering stuff and CAD and all of that. So I'm guessing you're a lot of self-taught, but I'm guessing you also probably brought people on board that probably did have some of that schooling and those expertise to help you work through that. So talk a little bit about maybe your staff, or if you want to brag on some people, or what your process is and your assembly, some of that. I'm just kind of grasping at straws a little bit to maybe glean out some cool things or thoughts that you want to touch on about your company and what makes it great.
Let me just do a quick little history of how it kind of developed. I think that'll tell the story. Sure. So the very first, after we did those initial, 9, 10, 11 machines that we sold, and then Deere, working with Deere, and then moving from them back to doing it ourselves. You've always got to have a starting point, and finances are a big part of that.
Yeah.
Huge. So I didn't really ever go to the bank for a loan or anything like that. We happened to just have those initial resources we could start with. I'm not saying people shouldn't go to banks, because we definitely work with the bank a lot now, in the ins and outs of business. But at the time, we somehow started out with a first machine that I worked with the guy that I was managing his farm. That's where we tested all that out. He was happy to do it because our old one was getting old. And so developed this new model that we built then for years with some alterations through the years. But the first time I sold machines, we sold a few the first year. I think we sold 5 as we went into that season. But I had to have them pay me half up front in order to build the machine. And it was amazing that they would even dare do that, because the only thing they could see was the one prototype I had built of the machine, basically, that they were going to get. And a little business starting out. It was absolutely divine intervention. It had to have been. I'm not kidding.
Well,
there were people that would trust that they would actually end up with something at the end of the day. That's what
I was going to say too. And sometimes just a good idea. I think there are some businesses that start off, at least to the business owners, maybe feels floundery. But you see these divine interventions because I think other people can see, whoa, this he's on to something, right?
Yes.
And I want to be in on that to because it creates efficiencies for your clients and things like that. So,
well, it was amazing how that all came about. And that first year was a huge hurdle to get through.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We didn't get paid until the rest of it, the other second half, until it was delivered and working in the field. But, there was just a huge factor of trust, unbelievable trust. That I wouldn't say it's unbelievable. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
Between some farmers and us and me as an individual. My boys helped me build these machines in the farm shop out there, and in the hay barn. I mean, we have pictures and videos of us working out there, putting these things together.
It's awesome.
And it was late getting it all done, and they almost missed their whole first season that we hoped to have there before that. But we got them there. And the next year it was an amazing year. We ended up actually selling 10 more machines that year. Wow. Because of just, it was kind of coming together, and the process had been proven that it did work. But the trust that people had was just, it's almost emotional to me, because as I think about it, I don't know that I would have dared do that.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. And those first ones that got in the field of that new model that was actually far above what the other one was, the old ones, they just were amazing. Amazing people we got to work with, and the machines worked amazingly well. Not without trouble, and corrections on some things.
Well, you always have to troubleshoot and make the tweaks to
to perfect things.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But that went on that way for, those first few years. We were just direct marketing that way to farmers around mostly the Western United States. And we built, I can't remember how many machines we built in those first 3 or 4 years, but before we went to the dealership model where we brought dealerships on to help us. But we learned quickly. We learned where some weaknesses were. We learned some things that we needed to change, and we made those changes as we went along. But those machines are all still running. This was back in 2008 when we delivered those first machines, 2009, 2010, and those are still plugging away, doing just fine.
So how many employees do you have here locally at your?
So right now we have about 22 or 3 in our Staheli West facility. We also own Western Powder Coating, where there's about 8 or 10 people there.
Oh, gotcha.
And then we own, we have a little video company that is Box 86. And so we've been doing that. We're actually, so we do some video work for ourselves and for other people in that too. But that's been a sideline to the business side of it. Staheli West, between the manufacturing side and the parts and support side, that's where we have a fair amount of people there. I mean, to us, there's a pretty good crew of around 22 or 3 people there.
Do you have like in-house engineers? Do you contract some of that work out? You do? Okay.
No, we do. I'm not really an engineer, but I designed the first machines and stuff that we did for a number of years before we ever brought a real engineer on board. And then later, as we wanted to do some new design work on new models and things like that, we pulled in one engineer and then a second and now a third. As we're developing some new machinery now, both in the steamer side and in some other things that we're doing some really creative things with too. So we have the engineering in-house. Of course, your suppliers can supply a fair amount of engineering too with the products that you use of theirs. We deal with suppliers really around the world
that are making the different parts for you.
Yeah,
like the plastics, I'm guessing, are produced elsewhere.
Well, and they're here in the state of Utah. So a lot of stuff comes from Utah. All of our fabrication work, our plastics. We have to get tires from India, and we have to get some things you just can't get here. But it's been awesome with how that's all developed, the supply chain. That's been, when you get into manufacturing, it's a different world. My boys and me were mostly what the crew was for a while, and then we've added a lot of super good people to our crew. Awesome. From I would say there's 10 different departments now that we have at Staheli West that take everything from the design side to the inventory management, purchasing, the management of how we deal with our legal stuff as employer, all of the HR stuff, our service department, our parts department, our testing department. There's just a lot of things going on there that really it's been really fun because I don't do anything with most of those departments.
Yeah.
I've been really happy to wash my hands of lots of the things, the day-to-day work in the business. And I'm actually kind of a little guy there, even though I'm the president of the company.
Well, listeners will have to forgive me if I gave this analogy in another podcast before, but an analogy I usually give about like good leadership and management a lot of times is like the conductor of an orchestra.
Yeah.
He knows the song that they should be playing. He's directing the music.
Right.
He makes sure everybody's on the same page, on the same count note, but he's not playing the oboe for the oboe players or the violin for
That's right.
the violinist. Is that the proper term?
Yeah, I think
Two of my daughters play violin. I should know that.
Yeah.
But, and to me that's a good balance between autonomy and oversight, I guess. Right. And so it's really cool to hear. I almost, I just have this picture of you and I'm totally making this up in my head, but I just had this vision of you with your engineers doing, with their schooling and their expertise in there. And I just picture you diving in and saying, well, have we thought about this? Yeah. Let's look at this, because there's also a balance with the hands-on practical experience that translate that perspective and working with your engineers or others in the company of saying, how can we take these practical things and translate them and marry them together that's going to create something that's going to build more efficiencies and a more effective product for our clients, right?
Yeah.
So,
no, it is very much that way too. I could be gone. My goal was, 6, 7, 8 years ago that within a year or two, that if I happened to not be here anymore for whatever reason, that they could move forward. And it actually is beyond that point now.
Oh,
I'm still very involved in new product development and ideation on how we're going to do things and what we're going to bring to the market. And I love that side of it. I do a lot of design work myself, but a lot of it, I do the conceptual design, and then I'll just turn it over to them and let the engineers do their craft. This new machine that we're building right now is a middle-sized steamer, and it was really fun to do this. I did a lot of the conceptual stuff, and they think I'm a little bit of a power freak because I like things done a certain way, but I didn't do any of the fine design on that, and it was so fun to just turn it over to this team of 3 engineers and watch them do it. We have one of our engineers, John Stanworth, is just awesome at managing the others. Caleb Franks and Malin Bruff, those guys just work really great as a team together. Awesome. But they have good leadership, they have good working relationship with each other, and as long as we know what the definitions are, the envelope that we need to stay within, they've done this whole new machine that we're working on, which is a mid-sized steamer right now for the round bale market mostly, and for some of the new stuff coming out with double balers and different things like that. But I've been able to step back away from managing all of that, but I still do a lot of design work. Right now, cool. I'm designing a very interesting machine that we're going to bring to the market, but I'm almost ready to turn it over to them as soon as they finish some of the stuff on the project that we've got going right now with them.
Here's another concept roll with
and they know what it is and everything, but sometimes I just shut my door and I say, you guys just leave me alone. I'm gonna dream in here
Hit the
for a while.
drawing board,
And I do a lot of the 3D design, and it's super fun. I love that. But when we get down to the nitty gritty, there's so many stages that has to go through to get it ready to actually go to the market. The engineering ideation part of it is the first thing. And that comes from not just me. I mean, there's people that are creative throughout our company, but you've got to go from the idea that this is a problem in the industry we want to solve. And that's really the way we approach everything we do. We're solvers. We're not just trying to bring some cool gadget.
And that's really where you find business that people are going to say, hey, I need that because it resolves this problem that we've had for who knows how long in the industry.
So we do that. And I'll do a lot of the upfront stuff on some of that kind of stuff. But then as we turn it over to the engineers to take it from there to reality as far as design's concerned, super fun to watch them work. They're a great team. And then we go from there to, we've got a fabrication company, Cedar Welding, here in town. That's just been awesome with us, that does all our fab work.
Well, and that's one thing I like. You said this, sorry to interject, but one of the things when we were talking about the suppliers a couple minutes ago is you talked about utilizing suppliers that are here in Utah.
Yeah.
And in this kind of advanced manufacturing, it's great to create synergies in the local economy that's going to create jobs and quite honestly build relationships that are going to help you find those successes that you're looking for. That trust that you were talking about, that trust stems from relationships. And so whether that's with, the farmer next door or the supplier up north or whatever the case is, it's so essential in creating successful business.
Yeah. Well, it is, it's a lot more complex than most people realize to do a manufacturing business where you go from, you're not just supplying it to some, buddy that's going to do all the marketing for you and everything. So it's everything from the ideas to the parts supply to the purchasing. I mean, it's pretty complex. There's a lot of moving parts to the manufacturing side. Our guys in our shop, we only have 5 or 6 guys that work in that shop to build these things. Wow. And we have like 25 employees. So in our facility there. And
probably an infinite amount of parts that go into these machines that have to be put together. And
but it's really interesting how much support and how much, work in the design side, the ideation, the design, then the preparation for production for it actually be able to be built, then the support side with parts, with tech support, with manuals, with all, having parts availability, the management of the business itself, the advertising, the video work, the whatever it is that you do. There are, for us to put our message out to the world and then have response to that. And then just the service issues, the warranty issues, all of those things are all big pieces. The testing of finished machines. I would say we have 10 substantial departments in our company that just address all of those things. Unfortunately, I don't have to do much with any of them.
And to think where all that started.
Yeah.
and I guess initially I think where all that started is that, day where you're looking in the dry field, but I love that we talked about when you were a kid, where all that started. And that's why I kind of wanted to dive way back and say, kind of show and tell this story of not only Staheli West, but of you and a visionary. And you'll have to forgive me. And then I think we'll kind of wrap up with this part. But the vision I was having in my mind of you and the company was like, you're like this, and forgive my analogy here. You're like this agricultural Steve Jobs or agricultural Walt Disney. You're in there. You're creating this vision for this. You have these problems that you have, and you're trying to solve it. And so, I guess to kind of wrap up and conclude, and I really appreciate your time today. This has been a great one. I mean, we've gone more than an hour, so I'm actually really excited about that. But tell me, in the last couple minutes that we have here, what is your hope and your vision for the future of Staheli West and the growth? I mean, you had that relationship with John Deere, and you pulled back. Now you're doing it in house. How do you envision yourself growing, or where do you want the company to go?
Let me go there. I think that's a great question. Currently, I will tell you that we work very well with all the major manufacturers that build hay balers around the world too. Cool. Most of them. I mean, there's some way off in Russia or somewhere that we haven't met, that we don't deal with yet. But, Deere, AGCO, New Holland, Corona, there's a bunch of companies that build balers. And so we have developed great relationships with all of them. So far that we've dealt with. There's always some new ones that come on board every year, and we go, okay, let's see what we can do with yours. So that has been a really interesting vision. And as we've gone into, I think we just sent our first machines to Africa just a few weeks ago.
Wow.
So South Africa, and we've got some stuff going in North Africa as well that will be coming about right away. Some pending sales right there. So we're in 7 countries right now around the world. Wow. And as I look forward to what we hope will happen, we had people here from Russia and from Kazakhstan and from Spain last week. We had people here just a month or two before that are developing the South Africa market, and it will also spread through other places in Africa, which will all be new for us in the continent of Africa. But they need it there just as much as we need it here in the United States.
So we have similar dry dynamics, right?
Yeah, and we're in Argentina, we're in Australia, New Zealand. There's 7 different countries on 4 different continents that we work with. And so Canada, Mexico being part of those as well. It's been super fun to see that grow. We are not just out there just to get worldwide as fast as we can. I will tell you, most of the stuff that comes to us is people calling us and saying, hey, we need you here too.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of detail in doing that because some of the countries have different regulations for boilers and all those kind of things. Europe is a tough continent, a tough place to get into. But we're working on it.
Because you got to meet those regulations. Standards.
Yeah, their stamp on it,
Yeah. Which means you got to make tweaks to your
And it may be
process.
components that you have to get that have the CE marking or whatever it might be on there. Russia, we were ready to go to Russia until the Ukraine thing broke out.
Oh, man.
And but we're back with those guys again now, and they're just saying, hey, we want to move forward with things. We just had a great entourage from 2 guys from Russia, one from Spain and one from Kazakhstan that came over and visited with us last week, spent a day with us and showing them, and they are just so turned on by what we do. As far as what it could do for the forage industry in their countries, And so that's probably going to be some of the next places we go, is into those countries. And it's just really interesting because everybody that does forage and puts it in a bale, they have the same trouble. And we address the most challenging problem that they have.
Have you had any competition come out of this?
No, not really. There's some who have tried to do it a cheap way of just putting like a water mist on hay, but it doesn't absorb into the hay. It's very slow. So steam has just got that medium that is just extremely reactive. One thing I will say is you take a gallon of water and it will become about 1,200 gallons of steam. Anywhere between there and 2,000 gallons of steam.
And how much steam per bale or a small bale?
And so like the number of gallons we put in like a big bale, a 1-ton bale would be about maybe 5 gallons of water, but it's, 5 times 1,000, or 2,000. So 10,000 gallons of steam going into a bale condenses back in there. It's really interesting how it works. But it's why what we do works and why what other people do is not working really well. And yet it's a niche market. So it's great for us because there's not a lot of motivation for other people to get into it because it is kind of niche.
Yeah, well,
and we're really good at what we do too.
Yeah.
We really are good at what we do. We understand it really well. But as we look forward, we will continue to go into countries that we can get into. It's not always about whether you can get a machine there. It's sometimes a lot of it is the legal stuff that you have to go through to use a boiler in their company or some of the safety stuff.
Involved.
And that's the easy part. The import-export stuff is really the really simple part.
Whereas the regulation
is
cumbersome
more
process.
And it isn't that our machines aren't safe. It's just that they don't have the label on for their country or something on a little pressure sensor or something like that. So it's a lot of work to get into countries sometimes. But it's been pretty interesting how accepted it's been in any places that they do dry forage in bales. And it's interesting how many places actually do that.
Now, for those listening, and I should have asked this earlier, you have the tractor and then it's your machine and then a baler behind it.
Right.
Okay. So you've got this little train essentially of where it's being steamed and then baled.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And if they go to StaheliWest.com or just Google steaming hay or whatever, you'll find us. And you can look at tons of videos, testimonials, and all that kind of stuff. And that is one of the other really fun parts of our business is our customers are so excited about what we're doing. We don't even have to say much.
Yeah.
We just need the camera there.
Let the product sell itself. Well, and I was watching some of those videos where Logan, correct, was showing the difference between a morning dew bale and the steamed bale.
Right.
And he was saying this morning dew bale is it's good hay.
Yeah.
But if you saw the difference in how it flaked and how you could utilize it. And anyways, it was really cool to watch. And you actually answered my last question is, where can people go to learn more about Staheli West? And it's just StaheliWest.com, right?
Yep. Okay. And if you can't, it's a spelling that is Swiss, so it's weird.
Okay, spell it out for us.
Staheli and then West, WEST.com. But if you Google anything about steaming hay or something, we come up.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, you'll get there. And as we're, our whole mission is to change agriculture and change lives. And those two things, that is our vision statement, changing agriculture, changing lives. We are working on some other technologies right now that address problems, and we'll continue to bring new products to the market over the years that aren't necessarily steaming hay.
Sure.
We're super excited about some new stuff that we have going that will solve problems the same way that we solve problems this way. So,
like I said, you're the agricultural Walt Disney. You've got that vision. I'm looking forward.
I'm a little guy.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to seeing more of what you have going on. And Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Dave. Yeah,
okay, all right.
Good. So,
Dave and Dave.
There we go.
Right.
Dave and Dave in the morning.
That's right. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks.